Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you're listening and wherever in the world you're listening. Welcome to Play by Play. I'm your host, Jayme Yarroch, and I'm coming to you live from the Clawoffice. Today, I want to share some things with you about replacing the negativity that has creeped into your life over the last 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 months. I bet it has, just like it has mine, and I want to talk about that today. Are you ready to get started? All right, here we go. Well, welcome back, everyone. Let me ask you, how's your new year getting started? I hope it's been a good one. I hope you've been able to disconnect a little bit from the negativity of social media and the drama of politics and the fear that has infected us, from every angle. You need to take some time to focus on you and focus on your family and your dreams. And, a friend of mine just recently recorded a video blog, and in that video, he talked about changing our direction by changing our inputs. And lately, I've had a number of conversations with people about how bad their life is and how much sorrow they feel and how much pain that they've been enduring. And the constant theme from all of them was this negativity, this negative. And it got me thinking about my own life. And I was reflecting on the times when I've been extremely negative, when I was in a negative place in my life. And as I reflected on those times, I could see a direct tie to the inputs that I had coming into my life. And you might ask, well, what is an input exactly? And it's really, it's a fancy word, I guess, that we could just say it's just the stuff that we're bringing in, right? It's anything that we see or we hear or we feel or we watch. It's the stuff that our mind and our body and our soul, it's what we take in. And that might be friends that we hang around with, or it might be TV or social media or music or the environment that we work in at our job, or maybe a team that we're playing on in a sport that we're in. Like literally it could be millions of things, but you get the point, right? It's what we take in. And friends, those inputs, they're directly related to our outlook on life. Now, I was listening to a podcast this week. I was driving around and I was around meeting up with some clients, and I was listening to this podcast, and this podcast just really drew me in, and it made me realize how much negativity that I've let creep into my mind and my life over the past 6 or 8 months or 10 months from all the COVID and all the riots that we've seen, and all, to the election and to the post-election drama. And there's been this massive increase in the number of murders in our local area where we live. And along with that, we've lost friends and family members. Here's the deal, folks. We have only so much attention that, we can fill. It's like a bucket, if you will. You could look at it by like the number of hours in a day, or I'm just going to use the analogy of a bucket, okay? And I recognize that is super basic, but that's an easy way to think about it. I'm sure there's probably a way more scientific way to describe it, but we fill that with experiences. We fill it with learning or news or facts or fiction or entertainment or whatever you might put in there, right? Oftentimes it's filled with the experiences that we're going through in that phase of our life, or that part of our life, that changes. But whatever those inputs are, they're all going into our bucket, and we only have so much, And for me, the past 6 months or so, or maybe a little longer, I can tell you that I've increased the amount of negative shit that has been filling my bucket. Like when more negative stuff goes in, look, there's less room for positive. The bucket only has so much room, right? If you fill up with a bunch of negative stuff, then there's only so much room for positive. If you look at it in just a 24-hour period, just use 24 hours. If you put in 20 hours of negative stuff, you only have room for 4 hours of positive, right? And so our bucket can only fit so much. We decide what goes in there. And when the negative outweighs the positive, then our outlook on life directly reflects that. And I was listening to this podcast this week, and it was pouring this positivity into me. And it made me realize how much that I have been missing that over the recent past. Now, I'm always involved in, or I'm always filling myself with self-development stuff, right? Podcasts or audiobooks or listening to YouTube videos or, whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm filling my stuff with stuff, but I can tell you that over the last period of time, some period going back into 2020, I have allowed my bucket to be filled with more negative inputs than what I prefer, right? And so I started to examine all of the negative things that I've allowed to become commonplace in my bucket or into my life or in my habits. And, things like news and the social media, and specifically people on social media that were constant sources of negativity, whether I was following them or friends with them or, they came up on my social feeds or whatever it is. The people that I'm talking about when you read a post or a blog or something that you see that they've shared, and it immediately makes you feel a certain way, whether you agree with them or not. We can disagree with people and it still make you not feel negative about a certain thing, right? But there's certain people that they can just push your button, right? Those are the ones that I'm talking about, because everything that they share or all of the inputs that you get from them, they have this negative tone or a negative slant. And so I'm in the process of making a deliberate decision to disconnect from some of those negative inputs that are going into my bucket as much as I reasonably can, right? I mean, we all have things in our life that are not necessarily positive, right? We just have to deal with those. We got to work through them. But I'm talking about the stuff that we can eliminate, right? I'm talking about those things that we choose to allow in, those negative inputs that we choose to allow into our bucket, right? The news media that we know is negative, but we let it in anyway. The negative parts of social media that I talked about, the friends that might be toxic in our life. I've talked about this many times for 20 plus years. I've talked about there might be times in our life when we just have to get rid of some toxic friends. And that's it's a tough situation. That's a hard thing to do. I get that. I recognize that it's tough to push people away that are a significant part of your life, but sometimes we have to realize that that person is toxic in my life, and I've got to distance myself from that negativity. It could be a TV show that fills us with negative thoughts. There's a lot of shows out there that I don't watch because they create this negative input into my life. And there could be music that doesn't uplift. There's music that can make you feel good, and then there's music that just plants these seeds of negativity into you, and the list goes on and on and on. But here's the kicker, folks. And if you think about your bucket, when you eliminate something that's negative, you've got to deliberately replace it with something that's positive, right? If you don't, there's a good chance that something just as negative or even more so is going to find its way into your bucket. And so you may be asking, how do I figure out what that negative thing is, and how do I eliminate it? Because I love what you're saying. I'd love to get rid of some of those negative things in my bucket, but I don't know exactly what they are. And so I would say take an inventory of your day or several days, and what do you fill it with? Do you watch the news? Do you surf social media? I mean, we've talked about a number of things already, but how much time do you spend with friends, and which friends? And do you have coworkers that you spend time with? Do you listen to music, or do you read books, or do you have shows on TV that you watch all the time? And as you think about how your time is spent, and it takes some deliberate thought to do this, right? But if you think about how your time is spent, think about what things put you into a negative mindset. Are you grumpy every day when you come home from work? Maybe it's the work that you're doing, or maybe it's your coworkers, or maybe it's your boss. I mean, I've gone to places where I worked, and every day when I came home, I would be grumpy. And oftentimes when that happens, we end up taking it out on the ones that matter most to us. We take out that frustration or that negativity. We take it out on our family, don't we? Does the news that you watch, does that cause anger to well up in you or negative thoughts to well up in you? Do you find yourself responding to people on social media in an argumentative way? Or how many times have you done this where you write a response out to somebody on social media and then you just delete it? Oftentimes, those are negative inputs that we're getting, and it's causing us to respond or feel in a certain way. Do you have friends or family members even that bring out the worst in you? Right? All of these things, and way more things than I'm mentioning right now, but all of these things, they might be negative influences in your life. And the reality is, folks, that you may have to make some hard choices to eliminate some of those negative effects and replace them with positive things. Look, it might be time to get some new friends. Parents, if you're listening, if your kids are hanging around with the wrong crowd, it might be time for you to step in and be a parent. I know it's hard sometimes, but it might be time for you to help them find some better friends. If you're hanging around with the wrong people yourself, it might be time that you make the tough choice and distance yourself from those people. Look, if your work is what is creating the constant negativity because of it's a toxic environment or the people that you work with, as hard as it may be, it might be time for you to start looking for a new company. Look, you don't have to change careers necessarily, but maybe a fresh start with a new company is just what you need. Right? Maybe the beginning of 2021 says, look, I'm going to start fresh in a company that values me and what I want to bring to the company. Look, if it's coworkers, maybe you got to have that tough conversation. Maybe you got to see if you can work it out. And whatever the issue is, and if need be, you need to involve a supervisor or a mentor or a coach to help you work out those issues. I've always said that nobody should go to work and be miserable. Look, there's way too many options out there to not find work that's fulfilling and makes you happy. If social media is what's driving you nuts, maybe a vacation from social media is what's needed. Maybe you just disengage from it for a while, right? There will be a tremendous weight lifted off you, I can promise you that. Maybe you just need to unfriend or unfollow those negative influences. I know this is some crazy stuff, right? Actually unfriending people. But look, most of the time, people don't want to unfriend someone because they don't want to cause any drama or they've got some fear of missing out. They've got FOMO, right? But listen, those same people that you don't want to offend, those are the same people that are creating negativity in your life. Like, are you serious right now? Like, hit that unfriend button and feel the weight that's just lifted off of your shoulders. We've got a local news outlet right here where I live. And the other day, I just decided I was going to unfollow them. And I know this is very trivial and this is small, but I just want to make it, I want an example for you. Their headlines are always written in a way that it just creates drama. And the comments that people put on their stories, the comments alone will drive you to drinking. I unfollowed them and you wouldn't believe how good it felt. Something as small as that was actually releasing in a weird sort of way. But listen, when you look at your bucket, if that's a negative thing that's going into my bucket and I take that away, it allows more room for positive things to come in. So as you start to eliminate, remember, you've got to replace your negative with something positive. Maybe it's time you start a new hobby or meet a new friend, right? Find somebody good that's a positive influence in your life. Maybe you need to subscribe to a new podcast. Now, don't leave this one. Stay on this one. We're gonna fill you with positive information. But maybe you need to find another good positive influence in a podcast. And if you need some suggestions, reach out to me. Maybe you should volunteer for something. Find an organization where you can provide some meaningful involvement, right? You can be a mentor to somebody, or you can help be a positive influence on somebody. Maybe pick up a book that is good, and maybe it's a self-development book or something like that, where you can fill yourself with some positive energy, right? Listen to a new audiobook or something, but add some good as you take away the bad. When you replace the negative with the positive, you're going to see an immediate difference in your outlook. You're going to think this sounds crazy, but everything around you is just going to have a more positive feel to it, right? The sky is going to be bluer, the warm is going to be warmer, the food is going to taste better. Like, just things in our life will just begin to be more positive because our bucket is going to be filled with more positive. Our input controls our outlook. And today I want to challenge you to make some deliberate changes and make those changes starting today. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. Thanks for listening to Play by Play. And as always, if you enjoyed the podcast, would you share it with those in your circle? And I've always said this, you are a replica of the 5 closest people in your life. And if you like the podcast, chances are they're going to like it too. I'm your host, Jayme Yarroch, and I hope you have an amazing day.